Hello. My name is Keith, and these are my stamps, episode 39 Belgium. Belgium is in Western Europe, and although it didn't apply to the present area exactly of Belgium, the name comes from the Belgi tribe, which was mentioned as far back as by Julius Caesar. The name Belgi appears to come from the verb to swell. So the Belgi were the people who swell, particularly with anger or rage. I've met a few Belgians, none of whom were swollen with rage, so perhaps that's something that has diminished over the years. Belgium is bordered by the Netherlands, Germany, Luxembourg, and France, as well as the North Sea. It's 30,688 square kilometres, which is 11,849 square miles, a little less than Maryland. Population of around 11.5 million, similar to Ohio. The capital is Brussels, which strangely isn't mentioned on this map, but it's where I've put the green circle. Belgium has an interesting history with language. The yellow areas on this map are the Flemish speaking or the Dutch speaking areas. The red are the French speaking areas, the blue, the German speaking areas, and Brussels is the orange blob right in the middle. As I said, the Belgi were first mentioned around 2000 years ago, but Belgium as an entity for centuries was part of a larger state or divided into smaller princely feudal areas. Present day Belgium really takes its shape from the 80 Years' War between 1568 and 1640, when the Spanish Netherlands was split into two. The Dutch Republic was the northern part, and the southern part became known as the Southern Netherlands. It's kind of a bit confusing because the name Netherlands keeps coming up, but that area, the Southern Netherlands, was the area that will become Belgium and Luxembourg later. So the Southern Netherlands were transferred to the Austrian Habsburgs with the War of the Spanish Succession between 1701 and 1714. Then, during the French Revolutionary Wars, 1792 to 1802, the area became part of France. After the French were defeated, the Congress of Vienna in 1814 created two new states. The first, the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, that was putting the northern part back with most of the southern part, but the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg was siphoned off to be a separate area. But however, both were in a union under the control of the House of Orange-Nassau, led by the king at the time, William I. The rich people in the southern Netherlands, Belgium, benefited from his policies and his rule. However, the Catholics were not happy because he was a Protestant, and also the liberals didn't like his so-called despotic ways. And also, there was quite a lot of unemployment and industrial unrest for the poorer people, for the workers. So, this led to some rioting, and allegedly, an opera was performed called The Mute Girl of Portici. And when the two leads sang the duet Sacred Love of the Homeland, the opera goers left the theatre, joined the crowd outside, and the revolution of 1830 began. There was a couple of months of rioting and fighting before independence for Belgium was declared in October of 1830. In December of that same year, it was ratified at the Conference of London, although the Netherlands didn't acknowledge the independence of Belgium until 1839 at the Treaty of London. And we'll come back to the Treaty of London later. Leopold of Saxe-Coburg took the constitutional oath as the first King of the Belgians in 1831 to become Leopold I. Well, at the time he was just Leopold, but he would become Leopold I. With the availability of cheap coal, Belgium quickly became an industrialized nation, and with it, a major developer of railways, steel, chemicals, textiles, and firearms. Later, Leopold II became king in 1865, and he took control of the Congo, which I'm sure you saw in the episode about the Belgian Congo, in 1885, when he took over, not when I did the episode. Leopold II had several children, lots of mistresses, the most famous of whom was Caroline, who was a 16-year-old French prostitute when he met her at the age of 65. When he died in 1909, it turned out that he'd left her substantial holdings in the Congo, making her a multimillionaire and making her very unpopular with the people and with the rest of his family, because the majority of the citizens thought that the wealth from the Congo was going to go to the country, not to his mistress. The Treaty of London, I mentioned earlier, from 1839, also stipulated that both Belgium and Luxembourg should remain neutral. However, Germany's invasion of them in 1914 to get to France gave Britain an excuse to join the war. Belgium became the scene of intense fighting, and there was a period that has since become known as the Rape of Belgium, when civilian executions, burning of villages, stripping the factories of anything useful was rampant. Over 95% of the country ended up being occupied. The poem In Flanders Fields became one of the most famous and quoted poems from the war and led to the poppy becoming a symbol for fallen soldiers. After the war, Belgium received the territory of Eupen Malmedy from Germany and recovered surprisingly quickly, with Antwerp hosting the Olympics in 1920, only 2 years later. In 1940, Belgium was again invaded by the Germans, and Leopold III was now king. He surrendered, and a government in exile was formed. Belgium was liberated by British and Canadian troops mostly in 1944. But after the war, there were big questions about Leopold III's handling of the situation, whether he'd collaborated with the Nazis or not, whether he'd surrendered too quickly or not. And in 1950, a referendum was held to see whether he should continue as king or not. He narrowly won the referendum, but there was so much anti-feeling that he abdicated in 1951 in favour of his son, Baudouin. After the Second World War, Belgium quickly formed or joined international organisations. Benelux, the idea started in 1944, was formalised in 1948. There was a precursor to NATO with the Netherlands, Luxembourg, France, and the UK in 1949, the European Coal and Steel Community in 1952, and the European Economic Community in 1957. As the final map that I showed just now demonstrated, there's been consistent polarization between the French and Flemish speakers in Belgium. There's also been problems between the Catholic and liberal politicians. All of this led to moves to federalize the country, which started in 1970 and was completed in 1993. The stamp issuing history. The first stamps were issued in 1849 and have continued to do so until the present day. Mostly with the currency of 100 centimes to being 1 Belgian franc until taxed by a fly until 2002, when the euro with 100 cents was introduced. I found it very difficult to cut down my Belgian collection enough to make it manageable. Hopefully, I have done that. I've tried to set it out in a way that allows me to show as many as possible, but believe me, I have chopped out quite a number. Anyhow, I've decided on these to start with the, how shall I call them? Not normal. I don't know whether Cinderella is the right term for them, but they are not definitives and commemoratives. They will come up later. So I'm starting off with these ones here, which are parcel post. Now, Belgium creates several issues. one of which is the difference between parcel post and the next ones that are coming up, which are the railway parcel post. I'm still not entirely sure of the difference. It seems that these parcel posts were issued by the post office and the railway ones by the railway, but it's not quite as clear cut as that. There is a very interesting discussion about this that I've put a link to. Anyhow, we're starting off with these parcel post ones. As I say, we're moving on to the railway parcel stamps. There are about 460 of these overall. The first ones just had French on. Then in 1895, they moved to both languages. Then, as you can see there in the top and the middle, there are two colours, and so on. The other ones are from the 1920s. Moving through these to the 1930s and the 1940s, I particularly like the set that's just above my head up there, the ones of the different workers. I think the engravings on those are excellent. Then we have these from the 50s and 60s, with one notable exception there right at the end, which was from 1987. Again, I like the top left set, the railways. I'm not a big fan of trains, but even so, looking at those, I think they're really well done. As I said, the last one there from 1987, there was then a hiatus in the production of railway parcel stamps until 2003, when a few more were issued until 2015. These are the postage due stamps I have from Belgium. And these are the semi-postals. It's not a term I'm particularly fond of, but that's what they're known as. All of these were issued with an extra charge to aid the tuberculosis fund, or the anti-tuberculosis fund. The one that jumps out at me here is the one bottom left, the black and white one. It's showing a folklore story of Bayard and the Four Sons of Aymon, which is a story from the late 12th century about four brothers and a magical horse. There's a fight to the death over a chess match and various other things. However, the original has 18,489 verses, so you'll have to read it yourself. More semi-postals. First up, there's a couple there for the Red Cross. Queen Astrid Public Utility Fund, the Eugene Issei Memorial Fund. That is not a picture of Eugene Issei. That's a picture of Queen Elizabeth. However, the fund was for Eugene Issei, who was a renowned violinist and composer, known as the King of the Violin. These two are for winter help during the Second World War for people who needed help during the winter for food and heating and so on. The Brussels International Exhibition Fund, and cultural works, religious buildings. Belgium has a lot of pre-cancels. Now, I was just to say when I first started, but it went on a lot longer than that. I didn't actually realize the significance of these as pre-cancels. I just thought they were kind of normal postmarks that happened to be exactly on the stamp. So that meant when I did find out about them, I had to rifle through my great box of swaps to see if I could come up with any. And these are the ones that I came up with. So the first basic group of pre-cancels were ones like this that either had the locality or the name of the country with the date. Apparently, there were over 105 different towns and cities that had their own cancellation, and this went on from between 1894 to 1937. After the Second World War, they started to put on the start and end dates of validity for the particular pre-cancel, as you'll see here. Then it was changed from that kind of full date to just the year, and then only the year, and then just a post horn. There are probably over about 7,000 different pre-cancels. The original ones with the city names on, you can get in a lot of them in two different orientations, whether they're reading, as you can see there, the one for Ghent and the one for Brussels in the middle at the top. They're the other way around, reading from top to bottom or bottom to top. There are also plenty of perfins from Belgium. Here are a few that I have. The CZ on that stamp of Leopold II is for Maison Charles Zuntz, who was an international merchant house, import-export of steel, glass, etc. AD was Ancien Établissement d'Anvers, a maritime trade group in the port of Antwerp. SM was heavy industry and metallurgical firm, Sambre et Meuse. TS, most likely Tudor Systems accumulator acid battery. And JMF, J. Mathieu and Sons from Brussels. And the final ones of the kind of others department are these. On the left, those five are all revenue stamps. There are cutout stamps in the top right. The one on the left of the cutouts is from 1893 and the other two from 1884. And in the middle at the bottom is a label from the National Agency for Veterans, Deportees and Prisoners of War. Now, for the regular stamps, the definitives and the commemoratives. And these are the oldest that I have. This one is from 1861, showing Leopold I, the first king of the Belgians. And there he is again underneath those dots in 1867. And these are of Leopold II from between 1869 and 1880. From 1893 to 1913, Belgian postage stamps had a margin tab, which stated in both languages not to be delivered on Sunday. The majority of them I seem to have without the tab, and of course, that makes it a bit harder to identify them because there are various different issues of the stamps. The 1C, I think, has 3 or 4. Some of the differences are only visible if you have the tab. But there is one difference you can see without the tab. I've tried to put it there. In the left-hand side, you can see at the bottom, it kind of looks like a dirty line, but that's part of a scroll pattern that continued into the tab. The one on the right definitely does not have that. So even if it had the tab, you wouldn't have that scroll pattern. So you can tell it's from a later issue. These are from 1897, the Brussels exhibition. Now we move to the next king, Albert I. He became king in 1909. And similar, I guess, to other countries, the different definitives are most frequently named for the designer or engraver. These are called Pellen's type. And there are two very similar issues between 1912 and 1914. There's the difference, if you can see, between the top two and the bottom two there is the amount of head that is shown. He's got 2 buttons showing on his jacket on the top and only 1 button showing on his jacket on the bottom, and his head is kind of closer to the camera if it were a photo. These are known as Small Albert, and these are from 1915 to 1922. And then this one is one of those, but overprinted at the end of the First World War when Belgium occupied part of Germany, part of which, Eupen and Malmedy, would then become part of Belgium, as it still is today. leading to the part you may remember in the map I showed you of the languages, the little blue part that was German speaking. That's from this time. From between 1919 and 1920, this series is called With Helmet, for obvious reasons. This series of Albert I from 21 to 41, the Montanez type, the Huyu type from 1922 to 1930. It's kind of easy to get in a bit of a muddle if you're trying to put them into years, because in 1922, for instance, there were three types of Albert stamps or Albert definitives all issued. There were some from the small, that's the one with the German overprint, some with his profile looking to the left in the top right there, and some of this one that I've just said, the Huyu type, all released in the same year. These were then surcharges from 1927. The kepi, which I'm guessing is the type of hat, from between 1931 and 1932. The mourning issue for his death in 1934. And finally, a bit of a cheat, this wasn't a definitive, this was a commemorative, as was the last one, of course. This was from 1974, the 40th anniversary of his death. In the 1920s, as I say, Antwerp hosted the Olympics in 1920. These are from 1921, the surcharged stamps. The heraldic lion, or the Belgian lion, on the coat of arms, these stamps are, I think, some of the most common ones. These ones, this set is called the heraldic lion from 1929 to 1932. Then these are called the small coat of arms from between 1936 and 1948. These, the number on the heraldic lion, 1951 to 1980, with over 100 varieties there to choose from. And then there was a change of inscription. You can see the font is different. The lion is different. His lion's tongue is larger. But the biggest giveaway is the inscription. It's this in this new one from between 1977 and 1987. There's a kind of banner with the inscription on, as opposed to it just being written as it was previously. But again, there are different varieties. I've put a couple of different 50 cents there. In 1930, the centenary of independence with all of the kings to date. So Leopold I, Leopold II in the middle, and then Albert I, who was the reigning king at the time. More from the 1930s. We've got the painter, Peter Paul Rubens. Here is Zenobe Gramme, who is an electrical engineer and inventor of the Gramme machine. Never heard of it myself, but in 2005 he was voted the 23rd greatest Belgian. So, however, Leopold II was voted 13th greatest Belgian, and he wasn't that great as far as I'm concerned. However, that's Zenobe Gramme. Others from the 1930s, these are from 32 to 36, Ceres and Mercury series. Then we have Leopold. Leopold III became king in 1934. These are known as profile left for obvious reasons. They're from 1934 to 1936. Following on from 1936 to 1956, the open collar definitive series. Then the Portman type from 1936 to 1969, which I find kind of strange because he abdicated in 1951, but they carried on producing stamps. And there are plenty of varieties of these. The 1 franc 75, which is the blue one in the top row of those, there are at least 9 different versions. There is a surcharged version from 1941 of the open collar type. Then there are these with the added V for victory, all from 1944. And then one of the strangest surcharges that I've seen, rather than putting a new amount on this surcharge, it's a minus 10%. So I guess you had to work it out. Talking of victory, so a couple more issues from 1944 with the prominent V on the left. Embedded in the stamp on the other is an overprint from one of the coat of arms series. More stamps from the 1940s. These were from the centenary of the mailboat service between Dover and Ostend from 1946. These two from 1947. On the left, Joseph Plateau, who was the inventor of the phenakistoscope, which I had never heard of. But when I read what it was, I thought, oh, I do know what that is. It's when you have a sequence of still images that you somehow move to make it look as if they are moving. So, for instance, he did it on a circular dial with different images around, and when you spun the dial or the disc around, it looked like the person was moving. I remember as a child, you made those little flick books and you drew a different picture on each page and then flicked it, and it looked like the stick man was kind of jumping up and down. That is apparently a phenac. Oh, I'm going to have to practice this. Phenakistoscope, which was invented by Joseph Plateau. That stamp was to commemorate the International Film Festival in Brussels. The stamp on the right shows Adrien de Gerlache, who got bored working on the Dover Ostend ferries that we can see on the left there. He also got turned down by Leopold II for a job in the Congo, and so he went exploring Antarctica, and this stamp was for the 50th anniversary of the Belgian Antarctic expedition. We then have all of these at the bottom from 1948 for export promotions and national industries. There are the docks, the steelworks, chemical factories, lace making, other textiles, agricultural products. Sabine was the Belgian airline flag carrier from 1923 until it went bust in 2001. And here are a variety of stamps showing draft from its fleet. And you can see the dates next to the stamps there. Into the 1950s, this one shows the poet Emile Verhaeren. It's the birth centenary. He apparently was nominated for the Nobel Prize for Literature 6 times. These were the first Europa stamps, and they were issued by all of the countries in the European coal and steel community. Dare I say it, an omnibus edition, now that I found out what that means. These were for the 500th birth anniversary of Pope Adrian VI, Belgium being a Catholic country, but not just that. Until Pope John Paul II, Adrian was the last non-Italian pope. So that's 500 years previously. He was born in Utrecht in Burgundian Netherlands, which at that time included present-day Belgium. And then the final one from the 50s is this one, or these four rather, showing the World's Fair from 1958 and the Atomium, which was built specifically for that World's Fair. It kind of reminds me of the Eiffel Tower, which was built for a specific show, but has remained there ever since. The Atomium was only supposed to be up for the 1958 World's Fair, but has remained there ever since. It's 102 meters tall, 335 feet, according to their website. It's the most popular tourist destination in Brussels. Next king, Baudouin, who became king in 1951. These are perhaps one of the biggest series of him. There are lots and lots of varieties of these stamps. I've only put three different, well, actually only two different denominations, the 150 at the top, and then two different 2 franc denominations, all with three different ones that are, I think, pretty easy to spot without looking at too many different details. There are apparently over 200 different varieties that you can collect from this series. Another of the common definitive series of Baudouin are these ones, which are known as the Elstrom type, from between 1970 and 1983. The one at the very top of this was the first one that was released for his birthday and has his dates on there. The rest do not have the dates. This one, talking of his birthday, was 1980 for his 50th birthday, and it's one of the very few stamps that's inscribed not just in French and Flemish, but also in German. It has Belgian in German. The 1982 Welche type, and again, there are some varieties. This was from 1982 to 1992. And then the final series from 1992, the Olive type. From 1960, the independence of Belgian Congo. See the previous episode for a rather torrid history, but some rather beautiful stamps. 1960s, we had the wedding of Baudouin and Queen Fabiola, the birth centenary of Victor Horta, one of the founders of the Art Nouveau movement, 16th on the list of greatest Belgians, so above Graham but still below Leopold II. We have the 20th anniversary of Benelux, that's Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. This is a stamp of Adam de Noort, a Flemish painter, one of Rubens's teachers. Not quite sure why he got on the stamp. It's to commemorate the centenary of the General Savings and Pensions Fund. This is the death centenary of Leopold I, the first King of the Belgians. And this, the 50th anniversary of the National War Invalids Works. Into the 1970s, and we have another great Belgian, Adolphe Sax, number 20 on the list. He was the inventor of the saxophone and also the inventor of the sax tuba, although the last public sighting of a sax tuba was apparently in 1852. Also in the 1970s, this stamp of Eupen was issued. Eupen is the capital of the German-speaking community of Belgium and part of that land that I mentioned earlier that was ceded to Belgium after World War I. We have another Adolphe. This one is Quetelet, who, amongst other things, developed the body mass index. And this one, to my mind, when I first look at it, I think, oh, that's French, even though it's got Belgique written and Belge in Belgique rather large letters. But I don't know, the colouring and the style to me looks French. However, it was issued for the Brussels Tourist Agency. Into the 1980s, and this one, 150th anniversary of independence. For the Confederation of Belgian Brewers, they declared 1986 the year of beer. And this was another 150th anniversary. This harks back to that Treaty of London again in 1839, when Belgium got its independence. Limburg was split between the Netherlands and Belgium. Now on to another very well-known definitive series, these birds. According to my Stanley Gibbons Simplified, there were 3 original different issues, and these are stamps representing those 3 different ones. However, on closer inspection, it appears that from 1985 to 1999, at least 1 stamp was issued each year of that. So it's kind of hard to say when one issue starts and when the other one stops. However, those are based on the Stanley Gibbons catalogue. Then there was another issue with showing both the euro currency and the old franc currency. That was from 2000, and then from 2002, just showing the euros. A few stamps from the 1990s. This to commemorate 50th anniversary of liberation after World War II. Another great Belgian, this is number 10, Georges Simenon, who was the author of over 400 novels, perhaps the most famous being the crime stories involving Inspector Maigret. This is the only Belgian stamp which has a denomination of the letter A. Baudouin's brother, Albert, became Albert II in 1993, and this one is known as the MVTM type, which was from 1993 to 1995. Now, when I remember when I was sorting these, there is a light blue one in that first series and this light blue one in the second series, and I was thinking, well, how on earth am I supposed to tell the difference? This second one, if I had known at the time, is known as the MVTM type with glasses. I know it sounds obvious, but I didn't notice that in these ones, Albert is wearing glasses, and in these ones, he wasn't. So it's a bit of a giveaway, even though the colour and the denomination is exactly the same. So the with glasses set was from 1996 to 1998. Then we have these known as the Brew type from 1999 to 2001. It has both the euro and the franc currencies. And then this one with just the euros. And then the series known as the Military Uniform Series from 2005 to 2009 with numerical face values plus the ones on the right there with a standard European rate and a standard world rate. Between 1997 and 2016, there were over 100 flower definitives, none of which have a numerical face value. There are some, as you can see in the top left, that look identical. They just have a different year in the bottom left corner to help the identification process. Into the 2000s, we have Kim Kleisters there. And of course, we have to have Tintin. This is Hergé's Adventures of Tintin. Hergé, the eighth greatest Belgian. And this set was released for his birth centenary, and it showed book covers with titles written in different languages, this one in Polish. And finally, my most recent stamp I have, which is from Christmas of 2010. This one has the left side imperforate. It's also available with the right imperf, the left and the bottom imperf, and the right and the bottom imperf. So these are a lot of my stamps from Belgium. My name is Keith. Goodbye.